To do. Self-awareness is a state of focused attention on yourself. This is the area that gives us our self-awareness. It's called the anterior cingulate cortex. It's right here. As humans, we don't develop a concept of self-awareness until we're about 18 months old. Before that, babies think that they're part of their mothers. They think that they're part of the environment. They see themselves as interconnected with everything. They don't really realize that they are a separate entity like their mother and their father and their brother and their sister until they're about 18 months old. If they're an only child, that's probably one of the things that happens if you're an only child is this is prolonged. So they will see themselves as part of the family unit for an extended length of time. If they have brothers and sisters, sometimes this is reduced because they see their brothers and sisters and they've got different personalities. So they see the interaction, they see the conflict potentially going on, and sometimes they will develop a concept of self-awareness before that. Some animals, but not many, show self-awareness. Wolves do not. Dogs do not. Any pack animals will not have a concept of self-awareness. They see themselves as part of the group. And if you've ever been around, if you've ever studied packs, dog packs or wolf packs or coyote packs, it's really kind of interesting. Everybody's got a position in the pack, and if the head wolf will be out in front, along with the most powerful males, they will be out in front, and the puppies, after they can keep up with the pack, they will be in between the males and the females. And the females will run back and forth, protecting the pack. And then there will be it's not really a rogue male, but a couple of males behind to make sure that nobody falls behind, or they don't get attacked from behind.
Do orphan children kind of develop self-awareness the same way as children?
That's an excellent question. That is an excellent question. Orphan children, of course, we don't have orphanages in the United States anymore, but orphan children will often form this type of attachment, since they have nobody to attach to, and they see themselves as part of a group. So it's a tough one. It's really tough. Humans aren't really supposed to be like this. They're not really supposed to be in masses like that. They did this in Romania. Under the communist leader Ceausescu, he decided that people couldn't raise their own children. They weren't loyal enough to the state, so he took children away from their parents. And he raised them in orphanages, but unfortunately he didn't understand human behavior. He didn't understand any of this stuff. He just wanted loyal subjects. So he didn't give them any affection, and he locked them up in cages, and there was nobody around to give them affection, and these kids turned out really, really horribly. So if I were you, I wouldn't take a trip to Romania anytime in the near future, until most of these kids are dying off fairly young. A lot of them died off anyway because of they were immunosuppressed, but they had very little, very small concept of self-awareness, and in the future, of course, we don't know what's going to happen with them in the future, but they don't really see themselves as worth anything, because there was nobody to tell them that. This is William James. He was a psychologist, philosopher, and physician. Worked at Harvard, one of the most brilliant men in the history of the United States. He wrote a book called Principles of Psychology in 1890, and in that book he described the development of the self. He described the emotional identification with an object, which makes it part of your self-concept. And he also explained how the self changes over time. And of course, if you think about your own life, when you're an adolescent, you acted one way. When you're a toddler, you acted another way. When you're an elementary school student, you acted another way. And you try to get along with everybody around you, almost like a pack. And actually, that's pretty much what it is in high school until you developed a concept of who you were by yourself. Some people never do. Some people can only identify with who they were when they were in high school, with that group of individuals. I was at my 50th high school reunion last year. Was it last year? No, 2 years ago. It was really kind of interesting because there were still people that wanted to impress a select individual. That's the individual that was the leader in our group, was the leader in my high school class. And I thought that was really kind of interesting. The fact that these individuals had never developed a self-concept. They had always attempted to impress this one individual, even though this one individual wasn't all that successful. It's not like he had a lot of money. It's not like he didn't even stay in the area. He left. And I was getting calls, people were writing me letters and saying, you know, what is this guy doing? And I was going, why do you care? There's one individual that was complaining that that this individual didn't treat him very well because he had children, and I had to explain to him that this leader, didn't believe in children. He didn't like children. He didn't get married and have children. As a matter of fact, he kind of played the field, as it were. And of course, people saw him as an iconic figure, but they wanted to impress him. And of course, he was a bit of a philanderer. He just kind of messed around with anybody that came along. And they thought that that was the way they were supposed to be, which I found really strange, that these people never separated themselves from this pack mentality of high school. This is George Herbert Mead. He was a philosopher, psychologist, and sociologist. He wrote The Genesis of Self and Social Control in 1925. Mead wrote that the self emerges through symbolic interaction. And of course, I just described some symbolic interactions between high school students. Of course, these were high school students back in the early 60s, middle 60s actually. It's the way that they thought about the world. They internalized the view of the generalized other. They think this is the way that everybody acts. And we get this all the time. This is one of the reasons that we're having so much conflict right now between the conservatives and liberals in the United States. One of the reasons is because if you feel a select way, if you're conservative or you're liberal, you assume that everybody should feel that way. And this is the concept of generalized other. As much of a ridiculous concept as that may be. And the reality is everybody has their own ideas. But we have people that are telling us what we should think. If we watch the news on one channel, then we get one concept. If we watch the news on another channel, we get another concept. Conservatives tend to believe in the generalized other a little bit more than liberals do. Liberals are a little bit more free-thinking, free spirits, open-minded. I guess I'm being complimentary to the liberals, and insulting to the conservatives. But they will adhere themselves to a certain individual, certain television personality, and they will believe everything that they hear from that individual. Liberals don't. I'm trying to think of anybody that's liberal that is a spokesperson for the liberal cause, and I can only think of politicians, not individuals on television. Rachel Maddow, I guess, would be one of them. People can be socialized in multiple cultural frameworks. If you move from one place to the other, of course, this is one of the things that you will see. Having been in the military, we were given the opportunity to move a lot, very frequently. Relatively frequently, about every 2 years we got to move. And every place we moved, everybody thought that was the best place in the whole wide world. Some of these people had never been anyplace else, so they assumed it must be the best place in the whole wide world. Where did we move? First place I went was San Antonio, Texas, and then I went to Wichita Falls, Texas, and then I went to Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, and then from Dayton, Ohio, I went to Lubbock, Texas. From Lubbock, Texas, I went to Germany, West Germany, and then from West Germany, we went to Omaha, Nebraska. From Omaha, Nebraska, we went to California, Riverside, California. And I can tell you that no matter where you are, people probably on the reservation probably think this is the best place in the whole damn world. I'm guessing you do. And your high school was the best damn high school in the whole wide world. And I can't tell you that that's true or not true. We lived in Mississippi, we lived in Washington, D.C., we lived in Japan. And I can tell you that every place we went, everybody thought that was the best place in the world. People that lived there, people that had never been anyplace else. Or people that had just visited places, like you've never been to Florida. My daughter lived in Florida, my son lives there now. They both hated it. That was the bizarre part. They hated it. Why in the world did they stay someplace they didn't like? She liked the beach, and that was about it. The beach, she found the men not very masculine. Most of the people weren't very friendly. A lot of the people from the East Coast traveled down, after they retired, they moved to Florida, where it's warm. Anyway, moving from one place to another, people learn they have to maintain a multicultural framework. Parents from different cultural backgrounds, if the mother's one thing and the father's something else, or from something else, or if they go to different churches, as weird as that is. I'm so excited. That's my wife. Hello? Hi, I'm in class. Is this okay, bye. She can't tell time. She's in Iowa where it's 10 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock. As funny as that is. Okay, so parents from different cultural backgrounds, if the mother's Hopi and the father's Navajo, which I know would never happen, but if that happened to happen, yeah, okay. So you've got one person likes to live where it's all spread out, and the other person wants to live on top of, one person wants to live on top of each other. You can imagine the cultural differences between the two groups. One person's white, the other person's native. One person's black, the other person's white. What did I see yesterday? Oh, I was at Blake's for a hamburger, of course, best hamburgers in Gallup, I'm guessing. Used to be Freddy's, but they closed Freddy's for some reason. Anyway, and I had a milkshake there. That was kind of interesting. I like Freddy's milkshakes, but Freddy's isn't open anymore. Anyway, there was a native lady there, and she was with a black guy, and I thought it was really kind of interesting. They came walking in, and geez, you would have thought that they both had neon signs on their heads or something. Everybody looked at it, and some people were glaring at them, so which was kind of interesting. So I went over and talked to them. Nobody shot me on the way out for talking. I know. You just never know what's going to happen to you. Anyway, so parents from different cultural backgrounds. He had a really interesting shirt on. It said Nagasaki on the front, number 6, and on the back it had a snake. and then it had somebody's name, and then it had Muramashi is what it said. I was trying to figure out if it was a baseball shirt. I asked him, he had no idea. Anyway, living in a subculture with different values than the dominant culture. So you guys live in live in the Navajo culture. Dominant culture is what you'd run into. Gallup's not really a very good example, but if you go down to Phoenix, there's an awful lot of white people down there, and that's the dominant culture. Hispanics as well. I've been listening to a book called They're There by Tommy Orange. It's about the Indians that relocated to Oakland and the trauma that they're going through now. It's really kind of an interesting book. The problem is that most people see them as Hispanic. They saw them as Hispanic, and for that reason, they lost their culture. Since everybody saw them as Hispanic, they started adopting the Hispanic culture, which was they started taking Hispanic names and whatnot. Really kind of curious. People with multicultural identities engage in cultural frame switching in response to situational cues. So if you live in Gallup where everybody's not the same. I mean, if you live on the reservation, there's only one culture here. Is that true? Or did I make that up? I can make these up. I'm really good at it. I was a creative writer. Probably not. If you live in Ganado, you probably the culture that you run into is a little bit different than the culture in Chinle, which is different from the culture in Tuba City, which is different from Kienta, which is different from people living in Utah, right on the border between Utah, or right on the border of the reservation. So a lot of times, if you're around another culture, sometimes you have to frame shift. If you've ever read Alexei Sherman, Alexei Sherman, Sherman Alexei, get his name back. Sherman Alexei, he wrote a book called, wait a minute, he's wrote a bunch of books. It's about a kid that wants to go to a white high school because the white high school is better. It's a book. He's from Colville. Colville is just is a reservation north of Spokane, Washington. And here's this kid. It's about how he has a difficult time. He has to act white. The people on the reservation think he acts like he's white. He goes down to the white high school, and they think he acts Indian, and he's rejected wherever he goes is the problem, and he doesn't find any acceptance until the basketball season starts, and then he's got this wicked three-point shot. All of a sudden, he becomes a star. So at least he's acceptable to the white community, and because he's a star, on a basketball team, the kids from the reservation start watching his stats and whatnot. It's really kind of interesting. Anyway, cultural frames with the shipment, and it's this bouncing back and forth between cultures, and he's just rejected in both cultures. So he's not really frame shift switching. The other individuals are just rejected. It's really kind of a fascinating book. It's a great book. Sherman Alexei. So if you find anything by Sherman Alexei, go ahead and read it. It's not about Navajos, but it's worth reading anyway. It's about Indians, okay? Has anybody ever read anything by Sherman Alexei?
I think I've read Reservation Blues.
Okay.
And Diary of a Part-Time Indian.
That's the one. Diary of a Part-Time Indian. Not Tonto and the Lone Ranger fist fight in Herbert?
No, I haven't read that one.
That's a good one. He's funny. Famous American proverb is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. This means the more you make yourself known, you stand out, you're unique, or you complain, the more attention you'll get. And of course, this proverb tells you to be unique. Be yourself. Be unique. However, not all cultures recognize the same precepts. A famous Japanese proverb, the nail that stands out gets pounded down. And you can see, this is a very common proverb in Japan. They're trying to tell you to be like everybody else. This means that if you're unique or stand out in any way, the culture will force you to conform. Be like everyone else, and that's the way the Japanese see things. So if you live in one culture or another, I was just watching 60 Minutes last night, and they had one of their articles had to do with electric cars. They're making electric cars in China, and evidently they made 1 million last year, 1 million electric cars. Tesla made, I don't know, 7,000 or something. Anyway, it looks like that's the next electric car market. Of course, they don't have as far to drive as we do. They'll go 200 miles on one charge. I don't know how long it takes to charge your car. Anyway, the Japanese are different from the Americans. Gender identity, identification of the self as male or female. Gender identity is getting more and more interesting all the time. If you look at Facebook, Facebook gives you a choice of 56 different genders or gender identities. You can have no identity at all. You can be male or female, or it gets really weird. Anyway, it gets really strange. In North American cultures, women are socialized toward relational self-concepts. In the last election, of course, last November, women won more elections than they had ever won before. So there are more women in Congress now than there has ever been before, which is kind of interesting. Men are socialized toward independence, while women tend to be socialized toward relational self-concepts. In other words, you're supposed to want to, if you're female, you're supposed to want to be part of something, part of a group. But as males, of course, we're like that lone wolf, rogue male thing. That's the way we're supposed to be. That's the way we are raised, to be independent. And females are not especially taught to be independent. These self-concepts refer to emotional connectedness to others, not the role of self within the group. So we still seek to be part of a group, but of course, females want to be more connected than males do. And this is one of the reasons why, if you've ever dated some guy, you had a really hard time convincing him that he wanted to either get married or get engaged or anything. Geez, you can't talk. He just wants everything to go backwards. Isn't that the way men are? They want everything to go backwards. They don't want to get married. You have to talk them into it. And when you say so, it's like you're speaking a foreign language.
I didn't.
What the hell are you talking about? We need to get married. Married, I don't understand. Is that we're supposed to be jolly? Men are so stupid sometimes.
I
Sorry.
think our culture is like it's more of a matrilineal society.
Matrilineal, sure.
And so I in a way believe that. And then like some other cultures, they're patrilineal.
Yeah.
And so I have a sister that's like that. She's dominant in her family. And she married a Kiowa, and that tribe is more patrilineal.
Yes, they are.
So it seems like they had a lot of issues.
I guess they would.
Who the boss was going to be.
Yeah. I had a friend that was married to a Kiowa. He was Laguna, and he was married to a Kiowa. He was in charge until she told him what to do. It was funny because he's standing up there. Of course, he's shorter than she is. Kiowa or Buffalo hunters. They're a little bit taller. She's a little bit taller than he was. He's a short little round fellow. Ah, it's funny. Anyway. But they got along okay, as long as he did what she told him to do. Oh, it was interesting because you go to their house, and he'd be, barking orders. Of course, half the time she's not listening to him, but he's talking about how he's in charge of everything. And all of a sudden, she'd say something, and he'd go, "What did you say something, honey?" One of those kind of deals. Anyway. Age-related stages, ethnic identity formation, and you may have gone through this with your own ethnic identity. At one point, of course, we are all born without an ethnic identity. We have no clue who we are. Normally, that's the way it works. Maybe your parents told you who you were, that you needed to identify with a select group. But this was discovered with the African American community. And the reason it was discovered was because back in the 1940s and 1950s, African Americans wanted to be didn't want to stand out. So they did things to make themselves more acceptable to the white community. One of the things they did was straighten their hair, which is, if you've ever been around someone who's African American, their hair's really curly or kinky. But they had to straighten or they did straighten their hair. So if you look at, if you see Chuck Berry, when he first started playing the guitar, he had straight hair. He didn't really have straight hair, he had to straighten it. But they would put this horrible stuff in their hair to straighten it. Then in the 1960s, they realized, during the Civil Rights Movement, they realized we don't want to, we should have our own identity. We need our own identity. So they started rebelling against all of these things that people had been doing, straightening their hair and acting real subservient, taking lower paying jobs. So in the 1960s, all of this changed. And it was with the Black is Beautiful movement in the United States that they started finding their own identity. But looking back on kids who were relatively young at that age, or at that time, they realized that there was a natural process to this. The age-related stages, unexamined ethnic identity, and this can happen through an extended length of time, especially if you have multiple identities. In other words, if you're not a pure one thing or the other, if you're not just white, or you're not just native, or you're not just black, sometimes you have to make a decision. At some point, you have to make a decision as to who you are. Normally, you don't even think about this until somebody forces you to think about it. Until somebody calls you a name. Maybe it's a derogatory name. You don't really realize that you're different from everybody else. And of course, at that stage, it's an unexamined ethnic identity. In this book that I'm reading right now, it's really kind of interesting because one of the ladies is half Cheyenne and half white. And she was raised in Oakland. And since she was raised in Oakland, she was raised in a white family. So she thought of herself as white, despite the fact she looks native. But of course, there's no other Cheyennes around. This is Oakland, California. She was raised in a relatively wealthy family. She doesn't even think of herself as native, and she doesn't start examining her identity until she graduates from high school. At that stage, and somebody refers to her in a derogatory term, and at that stage she realizes that she doesn't really look white. She's native, and at that point she starts examining who she is. But of course, before that, she was in an unexamined ethnic identity state because she was just. It's the same way with what was that? Snooki from that Jersey Shore. You know Snooki, the tiny one, a little bitty short lady with the. Well, Snooki. Snooki's not from the United States. Did anybody ever pick that up from that television show? She's Peruvian, and she's almost pure Quichua, or as pure as you can get, I guess. But here she is, being raised in New Jersey. She's adopted out of Peru to New Jersey. She becomes a cheerleader, and she's part of this Italian group. She's darker complexion, but she doesn't really identify with who she actually is, or her ethnic identity, because her ethnic identity is Quichua. Her ethnic identity is native. She's a native from Peru, but of course she's, I don't know, and that's one of the reasons why she's so short, because they're not very big down there. Anyway, she doesn't ever identify with that, but she does identify with the Italians who are a little bit darker, Italians who have black hair, just like she does, Italians with dark eyes, like she has. So she doesn't really identify with her own group, and that's possible. Now she's married to somebody, I can't remember, one of the guys off the television show, I think, isn't she? I can't remember. It's not the Situation. Situation's in jail for tax evasion. Isn't that his name, the Situation? That what he called himself. Anyway, unexamined ethnic identity. They have not yet thought about their own ethnic self-concept. They may internalize negative stereotypes. In other words, they may make derogatory comments about who they actually are, despite as if they were agreeing with everybody else. So they may say negative things. About the adolescent years, maybe in junior high school, these individuals will start exploring ethnicity through cultural events, through reading and whatnot. They may reject anything dealing with the dominant culture. This is very common. You can sit down anywhere you want. It's too bright right here. It's not wet here. They may reject anything dealing with the dominant culture. So they go from not knowing who they are to an extreme, whereas before they were making negative comments about their own ethnic identity. Now all of a sudden they don't want to have anything to do with the dominant culture. I was around in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement, during the Peace Movement. I had a lot of friends who were African American, and most of them were in this stage right here. As a matter of fact, these were my friends. But sometimes they would treat me really bad because I was white. You probably didn't notice that. I'm not African American. Anyway, they treated me really bad. And they started a group. They started a black group, and they didn't invite me. As a matter of fact, they didn't invite any. No matter how much support you gave them, they still didn't want to have anything to do with you. It was really kind of interesting. It's called the Malcolm X Institute. Of course, at this time, Malcolm X was still alive. Anyway, and I was hurt. I'm laughing, but I was hurt because they rejected me, and I thought that was not right. I've been not doing anything negative. Why in the world would you reject me at this stage? But they were in this ethnic identity search for their ethnic identity, and that's where they were. Eventually, of course, they apologized, and when they did apologize, by that time they had achieved their ethnic identity. They knew who they were, and I could be white, and they could be friends with me. But at this stage, they couldn't be friends with me. They had to reject me. We saw the same thing with the AIM movement in the United States. One of the reasons the AIM movement was so important was because there were all those urban Indians, the ones that had been relocated back in the 50s. Those individuals had gone to the West Coast. A lot of them wondered who they were. They saw the Black Power movement taking place, and they realized that they needed to establish their own identity. And that was part of the AIM movement. A lot of the leadership of the AIM movement were not reservation Indians, they were urban Indians. A good example would be, wait a minute, there was Dennis Banks and who's the other guy? What's
Russell Means.
Russell Means. Russell Means was from Oakland,
He was half white too.
and he was half white. And Dennis Banks was from Red Lake, I
He was
think.
Ojibwe.
Yeah, he's from Red Lake. Anyway, so here these two guys come together, and of course Russell Means has no clue who he is. He's Sioux, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But he was living out in California, and he had no ethnic identity. And he came to the reservation to find his identity. And of course, Dennis Banks had always, he was Ojibwe, so he'd already lived, he had lived on the reservation all of his life. So the two of them came together, and that was part of why AIM was so powerful, was because it was mixing the two cultures, or it was putting cultures together. And since Russell Means had no idea who he was, this is very important as far as being a native, identifying with your tribe. And of course, he had a mother and a father, and nobody had ever talked to him about being Indian. He looked native, played Chingachgook in the movies. But he needed to figure out who he was, and that was part of the AIM movement. And of course, it was part of the Black Power movement. I would say today people have a much better idea of who they are than in the past because of this. Once upon a time, if you wanted to get along in society, you acted white. You tried to be as white as you possibly could. Back in the 60s. You guys don't remember any of this because you weren't alive back then, but I watched it. It was exciting. And we saw it in the military as well. Yes, sir.
So, in that, you're talking about being age-related in this process of the search for self-identity.
Yeah.
Is embarrassment of your own culture, is that at the beginning of this?
Yeah.
phase?
Yeah, if you noticed, that's right here. Internalizing negative stereotypes. A lot of people go through this, and if your own children go through this, don't attack them, okay, or don't say anything nasty to them. It's just part of the process. It's something that has to happen.
How does this process play out? Have you seen it as far as like a group or a group of people? Does it? I was just thinking about like the Stanford experiments, when
Right.
everybody just got on board and
They got a role, yeah, we're given a role, and everybody
Yeah.
accepted that. You can see this on select reservations. If you go to some reservations, you go, geez, these people are acting white. Why is that? What's going on here? But you can see this whole process taking place on whole reservations. As a matter of fact, it happened at Colville, and this is one of the reasons why Sherman Alexie became a writer, was because he saw it happening on his own reservation. The whole political structure that they force you guys into is it's the U.S. government. It's a smaller type of U.S. government, which may not be natural to you at all. So I mean, that's about as acultural as you can get. One of the things that I've noticed on select reservations is that they have a problem with money. They have a real problem with money.
Have you seen this play out anywhere else in any other indigenous groups, like
You-
New Zealand or Africa, or have you noticed it?
Well, yeah, sure. Liberia is a good example. Liberia was started by the United States government. We decided we were going to ship slaves back to Africa. And actually, it wasn't our government. It was people from the United States trying to get rid of as many black people as they could. But they shipped them back to a select area called Liberia. And Liberia has been going through this for the last 150 years, where they try to act European, course, it doesn't fit. There are native groups around that have different ways of doing things. So there's this conflict going on between the people that want to be European and people that want to be native. The same thing happened in Vietnam. Remember, the French got kicked out of Vietnam in '54. In 1954, there were two dominant groups in the country. Well, actually, there's three. But two of the dominant groups, one was Christian, the Catholic, because the French were Catholic. So the people that they had converted, they tried to take over the government, and the Buddhists were the other dominant group. The other group was the Montagnards, the people who lived up in the mountains. But yeah, they were going through this same process as a group. And of course, that's what Vietnam was all about. And one of the things that happened after the Vietnam War, after we lost the Vietnam War and the North Vietnamese took over, they got rid of all the people that were Chinese, of Chinese descent in Vietnam.
I noticed it in Hong Kong, when I went to Hong Kong, everybody wanted to be Western.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of odd to me. I just thought, like,
When were you in Hong Kong?
when it was still under the British rule,
19...
90,
Okay.
I think it was like 96.
You know, I'd be curious to go back now to see.
Oh, now that they converted back to...
Yeah, because China's changing a lot.
And I didn't know if that had anything to do with them trying to keep independence from China. Hong Kong wanted to stay separate. And then, so I don't know, there were several dynamics at play.
I know, and that's part of the problem. There's lots more dynamics taking place than just, this is an absolute. Your family could be completely different. Your family may partially identify with one culture and partially identify with another culture. Where does education come in? If we're talking about a native culture, where does education come in? Does it fit? Is this acting white? Is this adhering to a white concept? That's one of those questions that you have to ask yourself when all this takes place. The strategic self-presentation is the process of presenting the self in particular ways to shape others' impressions. Your strategic self requires self-regulation. I'm supposed to be a college professor, so I dress that way every morning. How am I doing? Am I doing okay? Do I look like a college professor? Failure in self-presentation leads to embarrassment. If I wore shorts, you guys would probably laugh at me. Even though I've got great legs, okay? I walked all weekend in the snow. It was not easy. My legs are tired. It can become automatic with practice, of course, so the more you act like a college professor, the more you're going to be a college professor. So congratulations to me. I've only been doing this for 25 years, and I probably figured it out. Common types of self-presentation, ingratiation. Some people are flatterers. They usually do this to gain acceptance from other individuals. Modesty is another one. It increases your likability, but of course the more modest you are, the less that people see you as competent. Self-promotion, braggart. This is used when competence is highly valued. You try to tell everybody about how smart you are, or how much you know about everything. Exemplification, we see this in the military. Your combat cred. Oops, did I go the wrong direction? No. Okay, self-promotion. Yeah, combat cred.
That's what I was thinking when I was reading.
Yeah, your combat cred. And some people are like that. They have to tell you, all the stuff that they've done. Oh, really kind of interesting. Exemplification, show your integrity and moral worthiness. Intimidation is used for coercion, where you try to scare everybody. Self-handicapping involves placing obstacles in the way of one's own performance in order to protect or enhance your self-concept. So self-handicapping is very common. Forms of self-handicapping: drinking, taking drugs, smoking. When my son was, he was running in the state track meet. This is back in 1990. He was going to run the state track meet. So he stopped practicing. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, like 2 weeks before the state track meet, he stopped practicing. And I gave him an excuse. Well, I haven't been able to practice for 2 weeks. Yeah, right. He was self-handicapped, just in case he lost. And he did. He came in second in the half mile. He was a half miler. He ran a 1:47. The other guy ran a 1:46. My poor son. An individual's idea of who they are defines their self-concept. Schemas are mental frameworks that individuals use to organize and categorize the world, and we all have our own schemas. Self-schemas are mental frameworks that we maintain when we think about ourselves. This is who I am. I will go back to my office and I'll try to get something done this afternoon. I've got to download that stuff. My self-schemas, I try to sit in my office and be there for individuals. I think of who I am a lot because here I am, I'm different from everybody in the room. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but I'm a white guy. I didn't recognize how white I was until I went to Walmart yesterday. Oh man, I am so white. Then I went to Blake's, Aaron, what's Aaron's last name? I can't think of it. Anyway, he works there. And so I said hello to Aaron. And Aaron waved at me, and he knew the people behind me. And so I don't know if he said hello to me or not. He was saying hello to the people behind me.
Which Blake's?
Huh?
Which Blake's?
Blake's? The one in Gallup. The one, evidently the one in Window Rock's not as good as the one in, somebody told me that. I believe everything I'm told.
There's actually two in Gallup.
There's two in Gallup? The one on the road?
McDonald's?
There's
Oh,
one-
okay.
Yeah. The one by McDonald's takes forever.
The one by Safeway?
Yeah.
Is that the one that takes forever?
Yeah.
Aaron was on he was a fry cook yesterday, so. Got our food out really fast. It wasn't too bad. Aaron Lee, he was the president.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, anyway. Yeah, he's. For example, if we see ourselves as athletic, then not only will this be our definition of ourselves, but it will influence what we focus on in ourselves and others. I've always seen myself as an athlete. And that's one of the reasons why I walked all weekend. I'm trying to maintain myself. That's the reason I walked up the stairs instead of, I always walk up the stairs. You better be walking up the stairs. There's nothing more chicken shit than taking the elevator. We got to maintain ourselves. We're athletes. We've got to do this. I didn't go to the gym this weekend. I think it was closed all weekend anyway. They closed the campus on Friday, and I have the feeling they didn't open the gym this weekend. Anyway, I didn't go to the gym. But I do that because I see myself as an athlete. I've always been an athlete. And even though I'm 70 years old, this is my identity. So this is what I have to do. I was admitted to a Hall of Fame last year. It was really quite exciting. And I'd like to be admitted to all the Hall of Fames, okay? I'm an athlete. People tend to process information and remember information related to themselves more readily than any other. So if it has to do with you, you're going to remember it. And this is known as a self-reference effect. For most people, the most important thing to them is themselves. Research done where individuals were singled out by having them wear clothing that they weren't used to showed they felt as if everyone was watching them, and this is known as the spotlight effect. If you've ever had a pimple on your nose, you thought everybody was looking at the pimple on your nose. Or you had a booger hanging out of your nose, you figured everybody's looking at the booger on your, hanging out of your nose. Anyway, this is known as the spotlight effect. Some people try to wear the same clothes that everybody else wears so that they won't stand out. They don't want to stand out. As weird as that seems. So one of the things that you should, well, no, I'm not gonna, okay, forget it.
You should just go on with it.
Everybody, I'm sorry,
I said you should just mention it.
I should what?
You should just mention it.
Oh, no, I was just thinking everybody in Chin Lee wears brown, gray or black clothes. So next time you go down there, be sure and wear a red coat or something. So everybody knows that you're unique and different. That's what I was just thinking. Anyway. See, you got a black shirt on, you got a black coat, you got dark blue pants on.
I'm depressed, Bruce.
Okay.
Kind of sensitive about it.
So it's my
Yeah.
fault. Okay. I try to wear color every day. Once upon a time, this is back in the 70s, this lady wrote a book called When I Grow Older, I'm Going to Wear Purple. Because she felt like society always told her what she had to wear. Black and gray, and she couldn't wear any color. And so, and this is one of the reasons why they started that club called the Red Hat Club. These women wander around with red hats on, just so that they stand out, because they've always been told what to wear and how to act, as sad as that is. And now that they're old ladies, that they don't have to listen to what their husbands say, they don't have to listen to what the people at their church say, they can just do whatever the hell they want to do.
Self-actualization.
Exactly, and the sad thing is that they felt like they had to do what they were told to do all those years. That's the sad part. I'm never going to be in that situation because I've always done what I wanted to do, except when I was in the military and they made me wear blue clothes. I had to wear blue clothes or green clothes or white clothes because I was working in the hospital. I always wear. I'm a very showy person now, so that I can be unique. What are we doing? Future us's. An individual's self-schema does not only include who they are, but who and what they would like to be or fear that they might become. And this is our possible selves. If you've ever been in a situation where you could break the law or not break the law, sometimes you convince yourself not to break the law because you didn't want to end up in jail. And then you're going to be there for however long that is. So this is one of our possible selves. Somebody just got convicted. Oh, Paul Manafort. He looks like he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. At some point, when he was stealing all that money and he was doing all the defrauding that he was doing and talking to the Russians and talking to the Ukrainians, he should have told himself, this is not going to be good. I could turn out in jail. Now the problem is, if you're really, really wealthy, sometimes you don't think this is going to happen to you. If you're really, really rich people, they don't send rich people to jail very often. It doesn't happen. So maybe that had something to do with it. With him not thinking that he would ever go to jail. That he was Trump's buddy, so I don't know. What did Donald Trump say during the election? I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and nobody would notice? No, that's what happens when you got money. You can get away with murder. We'll see what happens. It is this vision of who we would like to be and who we could possibly become that drives us forward or keeps us from getting a butcher knife and chopping up our in-laws. I don't know if your in-laws are very nice, but mine have never been very nice. I should have been more selective who I married. I should have selected somebody whose parents I like.
Don't break the law on holiday weekend.
Is that the worst time to do it?
Yeah, because you might not see a judge till Tuesday.
Oh, that's true, that's true. You're gonna have to spend an extra night in jail. Okay. Well, I try not to break any laws. I've been pretty good lately. 3 aspects of self-concept is who you actually are, your actual self, your ideal self, the person that you want to be, and the person that you ought to be. So we have 3 ideas: who we are, who we would like to be, and who we ought to be. Yes, sir.
Just curious how you fit this into. I'm not the same person I am right here in this class that I am with my son,
Exactly.
that I am with my father, that I am with my military friends.
Sure.
I act a little bit different. The social
Right.
cues, I guess, are a little bit
Right.
different. And I act differently. So how does that fit into this? Am I my actual self with all those people?
Yeah, that's your actual self. This is your identity. You're taking on a role with each of those individuals.
But that's still my actual self.
That is still your actual
Okay.
self. Now, maybe you want to be wealthy. I don't know what you want to be. Maybe you want to be you would like to have been a general in the United States Army or something. I don't know. I don't know what you want to be. But the ideal self is who you think you should be in the future. This is who you see yourself 10 years from now. And actually, it's really kind of interesting. One of the, if you've ever interviewed, sometimes they'll ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Which is, it's irritating to me because when I was in the military, Richard Nixon was the president, and he used to do what he called management by objective. And he said, and he wanted everybody in the military to write down where they would be in 5 years. Which is stupid because in the military, you don't even know you're only your tour is only 4 years. So why should you even see yourself any place in 5 years? And I don't know. Maybe they wanted you to talk about or think about re-enlisting. Maybe that was it. But they made us all do this, and it just pissed me off. 5 years. I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years. I should be retired in 5 years. I hope I'm retired in 5 years, but you never know. Maybe I'll need the money. Or maybe my wife will want the money or something. I don't know. Or maybe she'll get tired of me. Make me live down here and not let me come back home. You never know. Anyway, your ideal self is who you think you should be, who you think you should be. And at one point, my wife asked me what I wanted to do. I was working in a hospital, and I said, I'd really like to teach. I'd like to teach college classes. And she said, why not? Why not? And that's when I started teaching. That was back in 1990. So I started teaching college classes. And I really enjoy this. I really am having a good time. Anyway, so that's your ideal self. Your ought self is a person that's morally just, and of course they do everything that they're supposed to do. Your ideal self is maybe you're a millionaire or something, or a billionaire or something. I've got a book that I've been writing for the last 15 years. And I've got this vision in my head that if I ever try to get this thing published, I'm going to make millions and millions of dollars. I don't know. Probably will never happen. I'll never finish it. I can't get this guy off the boat. He's on a slow boat to China. Now I can't get him off the boat and into China. How do Chinese people act anyway? That's my problem. How do Chinese people act? Well, you've been to Hong Kong. How do they act?
Everybody was busy.
They've always been busy. A discrepancy between actual self-ideal or ought leads to particular emotions. If the actual and ideal discrepancy leads to dejection-related emotions, so your actual self, this is who you are, and if there's a difference between the actual self and your ideal self, then you will feel dejected. Difference between the actual and ought discrepancy leads to agitation-related emotions. Emotional reactions tend to be stronger when related to an important self aspect. So actual and ought. This is the person I ought to be.
So actual and ought are at the same time, and then ideal is in the future.
Yeah, ideals potentially in the future. Ought is, yeah, who you really should be. I mean, if you're a drinker, you know, your ought self is not a drunk. Okay. The ideal self is probably somebody that's sober. Okay, just using that as an example. But it could be anything. My ideal self has six-pack abs. I don't right now. But my ideal self does. Everything else is okay, but I'd like my gut to be a little bit smaller. I wouldn't have any problem putting my pants on in the morning. It gets a little tight sometimes, depending on which pair of pants I'm trying to put on. Anyway. Oh, it's the sad, sad life, isn't it? An individual's self-esteem is their overall self-evaluation and sense of self-worth. Evidently, she likes herself pretty much. She's pretty skinny. She's got six-pack abs. This guy, I was walking into Walmart yesterday, and they had a picture of this guy, and his abs looked like actual cans. I mean, there was that much difference between one ab and the other, and I was going, that's not a real picture. People don't really look like that. Anyway, self-esteem influences how we approach and respond to life challenges. Self-esteem is the evaluation of one's self-concept. Most people regard themselves more positively than they do their peers. The better than average effect. Some people are taught that they are better than everybody else. They're taught that their group is better than everybody else. When I was growing up, my family didn't teach me that. My family taught me that I was not as good as everybody else, as strange as that seems. I come from a family of really smart people, and there's always a possibility that we would become arrogant. So my parents made sure that we weren't arrogant. And they did this, mostly my mother. They did this by telling us that our family was not as good as everybody else. Not our immediate family, but our extended family. And there's a bunch of rapists and murderers and all kinds of horrible people in my family. And so they told me, well, you know, when they talked about my family, they talked about it like we were the worst people in the world, and everybody else was better than us, which gave us the idea that we weren't as good as other people, as odd as that seems. So while this is back in the 50s, while there were a lot of white families that were being told that they were better than black families or Hispanic families or whatever, we were being told that we weren't as good as those people because our family was all screwed up. So it gave us a really interesting perspective. Some people are told that they are better than everybody else. And of course, these are the white supremacists, these are the racists and whatnot. But we weren't taught that in my house. At least that's the message I picked up. We didn't go to church, and for that reason, everybody went to church in our area. And I mean, if you didn't go to church, then you weren't socially acceptable. So we weren't socially acceptable, and for that reason, it was kind of a tough life. My brothers and sisters all went to church, not because they believed in God, but because they wanted to get along with everybody. They did it for social reasons. That's not the reason you go to church. And I kept telling them that. So I have two brothers that were presidents of their class. My sister was the first member of the honor society at my high school. And then there's me. I was the rejected child.
The black sheep.
The black sheep of the family. The person that wouldn't go to church just to be there, you know, just so everybody would see him. And I thought they were hypocrites. I thought they were liars. You don't go to church just so that you're, for social acceptance. Do you do that? My mother liked me better because I didn't go to church. But they did. They went to church. Anyway, people with low self-esteem, obviously I have high self-esteem. People with low self-esteem seem to be more adversely affected by negative life events than people with high self-esteem. If I can get this thing to work, this is really cool, because this lady has just been through a tornado. If I can make this thing work. There it goes. Okay. Maybe. Or maybe not. This is in Moore, Oklahoma, if you've ever been to Moore. One of the things about Oklahoma, there's more people in Oklahoma claim to be American Indian than any other place in the United States. But then again, they had a lot of reservations there. It was the Indian territory.
And what was it like when this came through?
I was holding my dog. I was sitting on the stool holding my dog.
When she says stool, she's talking about toilet.
This was a game plan all through the years, to go in that little bathroom. And the electric never went off because the electric went off in the bathroom about the same time I felt the stool come up out of the floor. And I rolled around a little bit, and when it stopped, I was right there. That Presto cooker is what I saw.
You were lying there in the bubble.
And I never lost consciousness, and I hollered for my little dog, and he didn't answer, or didn't come, so I know he's in here somewhere. But it just, it was there and it was gone. Just no time. And then it was light, and I thought, well, I'm okay. And I had some stuff on top of me, and I started wiggling.
Are you able to comprehend yet what happened here?
I know exactly what happened here. Exactly. And
What do you think of all this? This is your neighborhood. I can't imagine.
this is life in the big city.
The dog. The dog.
The dog. Hi, puppy.
The dog.
Oh, Pappy. Oh, Pappy. Bless your little bitty heart. Help me. Oh, Pappy. Oh, Well, I got doctor's answered one prayer to let me be okay. He answered both of them. This is my life, my second prayer.
Tough lady. Tough lady. Did you see how torn up everything was? That's what happens when you get hit by a tornado. Your house explodes. Oh, wait a minute. No, we don't want that. Anyway, tough lady. And they were trying to get her to cry. They were trying to make her cry because that's better television. And then when they found the dog, the camera person didn't come over to help. They just wanted to film it. What a jerk. You know, the dog's trapped and there's... I'm sorry. Anyway, do you understand what happened here? It's life in the big city is what she said. That's Moore, Oklahoma. She should have punched that guy right in the nose. Anyway, self-esteem. Lady with high self-esteem. Good. Self-enhancement and self-verification motives conflict in low self-esteem. Did you? Oh, you're not raising your hand. I'm sorry. Okay. Self-esteem persons In low self-esteem persons, it appears that self-enhancement motive operates in response to a person's feelings, while self-verification operates in response to a person's thoughts. The two motives operate in different time courses. The affective route is quicker, but the cognitive route is more persistent. The two motives serve as checks and balances on each other. Only in the cases of maladjustment does one motive strongly dominate the other. Studies suggest that self-enhancement motive is weaker in collectivist societies than in individualist societies, so this conflict may be an artifact of individualist cultures. So there you go, self-enhancement and self-verification. Self-verification has to do with your cognitive processes. Your self-enhancement has to do with your feelings. Okay. There's a dark side to self-esteem. People with high self-esteem may react with greater aggression than others when someone challenges their favorable self-assessments. And of course, this is can be a problem. The stability of high self-esteem seems to determine whether threats to self-esteem lead to aggression. And of course, we just had a situation where an individual was fired and he immediately pulled out a pistol and started shooting people. Hey, Joe. Come on in, have a seat. You don't stand around. There we go. Anyway, so his self-esteem was attacked, and of course he immediately became aggressive when that happened. The stability of high self-esteem seems to determine whether threats to self-esteem lead to aggression. Unstable self-esteem may come from conflicts between explicit and implicit self-esteem. High explicit self-esteem and low implicit self-esteem are together associated with narcissism. And of course, some people are relatively narcissistic. In other words, they see themselves as perfect, whereas they're, of course, hardly anybody's perfect. But that's what a narcissistic personality does. Some people are really pretty. I don't know if you noticed this or not, but there are some people who are really pretty. Those individuals tend to be relatively narcissistic because they've always been able to get away with stuff that the rest of us don't get. Us ugly guys don't get away with. And of course, they don't even recognize. It's almost like they're supposed to be given things because they're so pretty, as irritating as that is. These individuals tend to be narcissistic. I'm not going to pick on Trump again. Yeah, why not? Trump used to think that he looked like Elvis. As weird as that is. No, I'm not kidding. He thought he looked like Elvis. So that was part of his self-esteem. He does seem to be fairly narcissistic. In Greek mythology, Narcissus fell in love with his own reflection in a pool of water and was so fond of his own image that he couldn't leave and eventually starved to death because he couldn't stand to be away from himself, as weird as that is. Today, narcissism refers to the combination of excessive self-love and a lack of empathy toward others, and usually this is a problem with people that are narcissistic. They think that the world revolves around them. As exciting as revolving worlds are, I guess. Anyway.